This is a review of the low and means fat fork tubes for the Yamaha Bolt. The fat fork tubes are meant to install over the forks on the top of where the top of the triple tree is. These particular tubes were made to be used with the stop turn signals, so they'll fit right underneath them when we're done. For those of you who are concerned that the fat fork tubes might scratch the tubes themselves, you don't have to worry about that because Low Mean has installed nylon spacers in between the tube and your fork so that nothing that does get scratched will actually slide on there nice and smooth. In order to install this, we're going to need to take off, taking off the headlamp would be a lot easier. You can see I've already done that. We'll also need to take off the brake caliper, the front wheel, and then we'll loosen up the bolts on the triple tree and on the turn signals, and the forks will slide right out. Well, as you can see, when installing the very first fork tube, the nylon ring that's made to protect between the fork and the tube itself came out. These appear to be glued in, maybe hot glue or something maybe a little bit more powerful than that, but the ring did not want to go onto the tube. Now, they do need to fit tight, but my recommendation to Low and Mean would be to bevel these tubes on the inside because it didn't want to go over the fork tube itself. And by beveling that inside part, that would probably be enough to help it scoot over it. So that would be my recommendation. I'm going to see if I can start with the other side maybe and see if that glue is strong enough to hold to install. Actually no, I think what I'll do is I'll probably try to put this ring on first and then put the tube on over that. Once the ring's on the tube, it'll scoot down the tube and then it'll be held to that location because the glue is still there, so it won't go any further than that, and when it pushes down it'll still be in the location it needs to be. But for future reference for Low and Mean, I would recommend beveling the inside of that nylon ring to facilitate inserting this over the tube. So I ran into some more issues with installing the fork tubes. The top nylon piece also came off when I was trying to install the first fork tube. However, I was able to insert it back down, get the fork tube on, and get it installed. However, the second one was more of a problem. The same things happened with the nylon spacer rings, but there was also another issue, a much larger issue at hand, and that is here. This is the fork lock, and the tube, if I can zoom in here a little bit, the tube actually is too large to fit in between the fork lock. And so what I did is I tried to loosen up this screw here. By the way, this is a screw that requires a key. It's actually the same key that's required on your shocks. And I happen to have that, so I was able to loosen that screw quite a bit. And this one here is filled. I guess it's an Allen, but it's filled with Loctite or something. So I didn't mess with that. My thought was that I could loosen up this screw enough and hammer using a rubber mallet, of course, and rubber in between here to hammer it back to give me just enough room. I mean, because we're just talking about maybe a couple of millimeters at the most, or a millimeter, somewhere in between, and allow me to get this tube into place when the fork tube slides up. However, this does not slide. That was the bad news. So I had to really work the fork up into the tube. Of course, this the fat fork tube here, because I had to get it in between the fork lock and where the tube comes up into the triple tree, the fat fork tube, it's actually angled this direction. So I had to kind of bend it, which it didn't really bend very much because it's around this fork tube. And when that's inserted up into the fat fork tube, it won't really allow this sleeve to bend much. So eventually I was able to get it all the way up to this point here, where then, and again, the top spacer was out of that one, so I had to kind of work that down, back down inside enough to about this location here. We're using a couple of screwdrivers from above, and get the signal into place, and then had to swing around here and use a piece of metal or a screwdriver to bend the triple tree clamp here out enough to where I could get some leeway to slide the tube up, because it's at this point, because the fork tube wants to angle outward, and I'm trying to push it back in to fit into the upper part of the triple tree. Because of that, it didn't make it slidable without relieving more tension off of this by bending out that clamp. And then you can see here I just kind of covered up the bottom of the fork with a cloth and used a rubber mallet to hammer that up slowly to get the tube up into location. You can see it's actually too high here. I'm going to lower. I want to get a little bit high, because as this is being pushed up, you can see there's a space now inside here where the and I want that back down. And my hope is that when I hammer the top of the fork back down, that it should hopefully push this enough down location it will cover up that gap. I'm not sure why there's a gap there, unless it's putting so much pressure up here on the signal that it's actually, because this is rubber right here, so it may have pushed up into the rubber, and that's what's caused this gap here. So again, hopefully hammering this back down will give me enough room to close up that gap. But my recommendation to low and mean on this problem would be to, when they create the tube, would be to put an indentation right around here where the fork lock is, or somewhere on the tube, about, I don't know, about an inch high, just a little bit of an indentation, so that it slides on, you know, or it has enough room to go around this fork lock. So my overall impression of low and means fat fork tubes, I think they're great. As you can see, they really make a difference in the front end of the bike, the way they make them look. If you want to black out your bike, this is really the only option that I know of to go with. And combine that with the fork gaiters, which is also available from Low and Mean, and you can totally black out the front end. And the fork gaiters also will help you keep road debris and rocks and things like that from ruining your tubes over time. Again, Low and Mean could do a better job on the fitment of the tubes and do a better job on the design of those nylon rings and the glue that they use to attach them with. But other than that, I highly recommend it.